Hello and welcome to this video on Lightroom Mobile. So today we're going to be using the Adobe Photoshop Lightroom but on a smartphone. So anyone who's familiar with Lightroom in the desktop app on Mac and PC may recognize some of the features in this. So first of all, what we're going to talk about is masking for landscapes, and just go through a few tips on masking for landscapes. So just to mention the phone that I'm using this on, so I'm using this on quite an old phone, so it's a Samsung Galaxy Note 8, which is about 5 years old at this stage, running Android 9, and Lightroom runs quite well on it. The phone had a high spec when it was released, so it is a higher end phone, so the app seems to run well on it. So it may depend on whether or what type of phone you have, whether Lightroom will run or runs well on it. So within the Lightroom app itself, there is also access to a camera, and the camera is very useful because it allows you to take raw images. So it allows you to take Adobe DNGs, and again, this is something that you'd have to check with your own individual smartphone to see if your camera has the ability to take DNGs from the camera app. But what it gives you is it gives you an image with a lot of tonal depth and a lot of ability to edit landscapes and other types of images using the powerful tools within Adobe Photoshop Lightroom, this app. One other thing to notice as well is that this does have some cloud-based functions, so such as syncing. So it may sync. You will need your Adobe account to log into that. It does sync images with with your Adobe account, so you need to make sure that it's not going to use your cellular data. If you're on a paid plan for your cellular data, your mobile data, then you may have to. It will use data. So you can turn this off within the settings, so that it only syncs when it's on Wi-Fi network. The other thing that you need to be aware of, and I'll mention this as well, is some of the actual tools, the masking tools, for instance, are cloud-based tools. So they use the cloud to process. To do the processing. So for instance, selecting skies or subjects, these are cloud-based tools, but that is indicated also within the app, and we'll take a look at that. First of all, if I go to, so I'm going to go to my photos, and we're going to look at editing one of these. So I think we'll just take this one. So these photos were actually taken from a ferry as I was passing through the Finnish archipelago, which is just a lot of islands. And it was quite a nice day, and it had some nice clouds in the sky. So the shots aren't perfect, but they were shot using the Adobe Lightroom camera, and they are in a DNG format. So they should have plenty of data in them, latitude for editing. So you see here on the left we have a little histogram, so that gives us an indication of the exposure of the image. So if you remember, on the left hand side we have our dark tones, on the right hand side we have our light tones, and in the middle we have our mid-tones. So you can see from this image there's not too many highlights. There's nothing at all going on in this side of the image. And it's nice to have this access to this histogram, so we can keep an eye on what's going on. A gentle tap on the screen, like I just gave here, will remove any of this interface, so we can just look at the image or just focus on the image. So if I tap on it again, we get this histogram. The histogram can be turned on and off from the settings. So if we click in here, we have an option to show histogram, to turn it off. We can also show info. So it shows the time and date when the photograph was taken. I can turn that off. It won't allow you to have both the histogram and the info at the same time, so it's one or the other. I will keep the histogram there when I start doing my editing, because it will at least give an idea if we're causing any clipping. So clipping is when we overexpose our highlights or underexpose our shadows and we lose detail in those areas. So I'm just going to turn the histogram off for the moment, and we're going to create a mask. So we're going to do a mask for the sky and for the foreground because we want to edit those separately. First of all, I'm going to do a little crop because I notice here that my finger at the very bottom left hand corner here, my finger was actually in some of the shots. So I'm just going to crop that out. So I'm going to go into the crop tool, and you have your crop tool here. It's quite nice. You can also do this angle adjustment if you wish so. So I'm just going to do a very small crop here where I'm not going to adjust the angle so much, just to straighten it a tiny bit. And then we're going to grab this corner here. So I'm using a pen to edit. I'm using the pen that came with the Galaxy Note 8. Of course, this works just as well with your finger. I just find because of the size of the screen and the interface, the pen can be a little bit more accurate with this. And it's also useful for the video to show where I'm looking at and what I'm doing. So it's cropped now. I'm going to click on this tick mark over here in the corner. So we have we've cropped out that little part of my finger that we're showing. And I'm going to now go to my masking tool. So you have your tools here. So I'm using my phone in landscape mode at the moment. If you're using your phone in portrait mode, you'll see these tools appear at the bottom of your screen. So they're at the right hand side when you're in landscape mode. If you're in portrait mode, you will notice that these tools have to have names underneath them. It tells you what they are. They disappear when you move into landscape mode. But this is the masking option here. So I'm in my now masking. You can see it in the top left hand corner. So you have a number of different options here. So this, you have your help question mark. Next to that then is an option to turn your mask on or off. And then we have some further options here for how we show overlays, opacity, tool overlays, and so on. So these can all be changed if you need be. So this allows you to change the mask overlay. So the colors can be changed from red, green, or blue, and also the color overlay can be changed as well. But we're going to leave it on the color overlay and the opacity at about 50%. That's all good. So I'm just tapping away from that area to close that menu. So we're going to add a new mask. So we click on the little plus sign inside the blue circle, and it gives us a number of options. So it's got a select subject and a select sky. So as you can see, there's a little cloud symbol next to these. So that means they use cloud processing. So they will use data over your cellular mobile network or your Wi-Fi network. So if you're not on a Wi-Fi network and you have a paid plan, just be aware that you're going to be sending data backwards and forwards. Also, you also need to be aware that if your network is slow or you're in a place with poor service, that this will affect how these tools work. And I've also, because when I was on the ferry, some of the signal the mobile signal gets quite weak in areas. I was finding it difficult actually to use these tools because it does need a good connection, and it does recommend that you use Wi-Fi when you're using these tools, or that you have a good connection, so 4G or 5G cellular connection. So I'm going to select sky here, and it says detecting sky. Now sometimes this does give an error, so yeah, here we go. Something went wrong. Okay, so now we have our sky selected. So you can see problems can occur. I exited the masking tool and went back in, and it seems to have connected fine. So first of all, it's detected our sky. You can see there are some issues here. So it selected a lot of the foreground. So if I'm just going to use my pinching on my screen to zoom in, and we can see that we have some issues, that it's selected areas that are not clearly in the sky, and it's also left one or two patches in the sky unselected. just this one patch actually unselected. So these have to be fixed. So the useful tool and what's powerful about this masking tool is that you can add and subtract from your mask. So what we're going to do now is we're going to first of all, I'm going to add. So I'm going to just add with the brush. So I'm going to zoom in here again using my pinching technique, and I'm going to click on this plus minus sign. I'm going to go to add to mask, and I'm just going to use the brush, and I'm just going to brush in this little area here where we had this issue with the bit of the sky that was missing. And now I'm going to create a subtract from mask, and I'm going to use a linear gradient. So first of all, actually, let's go back. So yeah, so we have our, let's first of all zoom out. So I should have zoomed out using my pinching technique before I do the subtract mask. So subtract from mask 1, yes, and we're going to use a linear gradient. So now I'm going to start pulling down, not too close to the top. I'm going to start moving down. Here we have it. So we're going to refine this, so I'm not going to leave it like this. So now we have our linear gradient, and we can refine this a little bit because at the moment it's obviously pulling too far into our foreground. So we can refine that by just clicking on the lines and dragging them. So I can drag this up here, I can click on this line and drag it down here. So that reduces the range of our gradient. You can see there before and after. So if I hold my finger or the pen on the screen, it shows me what the image looked like at the beginning, but I haven't made any changes yet, so we don't see anything. So I can also then move the center of the gradient. So by just coming down here, and we can also maybe pull this up a little bit further. And then if you want to straighten it, you can just, on the center line, you can hold it and then you can move it to straighten it with the horizon. So that's our mask created now, and we've subtracted from our mask using the linear gradient tool in order to avoid affecting too much of our foreground as it was before. And also the selection by default is quite hard edges, so this softens our edges a little bit, and it softens the effect as it moves towards the horizon. So one thing just to note is that you need to make sure that you don't have your, so this was like this, so it was the wrong way around, so it should appear like this. So the red, so we put this around all the way here, we'll see that we're subtracting from all of this area up here. So your red dot needs to be at the bottom. And I can see my mask at any time by using this little icon in the top right hand corner, but turning it on and off to get a visual idea of it. So I'm going to straighten that up, and then if you want to pull it up from the center, click on the center little icon and pull it up. Because I want to avoid using those very harsh areas and just have it fading as it gets to the horizon. So that's pretty good. So now let's go back into our exposure, and then we can start seeing that, yeah. So that looks good now. So we're changing the exposure of the sky. We can bring it in a little bit darker. I also like to use these effects tools, so our clarity and dehaze. So maybe I can just turn the mask off for the moment so we can see what's happening when I'm using. So dehaze is great for getting your detail back in your sky, clarity as well, adding some clearness to it so we get a nice effect in our sky. If your image is grainy, you can remove grain by reducing the texture. If we go back to our overall exposure, then we can look at increasing the exposure for the sky. We can also add contrast if we wish. We can separately edit the highlights and the whites if we want to, so if there's details in your clouds that you're losing. And we can also, if you need to, you can boost the shadows or your blacks to preserve some of that nice color. So that's the edit done on our sky and the mask for our sky created. So now let's do one for the foreground. So I'm going to go back into my mask, and I have here at the bottom, I have here the mask that I created for the sky. I'm going to add a new one now, and I'm going to add a linear one so we can edit our foreground. So I'm going to drag up from the bottom, and let's just refine this a little bit. Yeah, I think that's okay. So then going into my settings, once I start changing the exposure, then I can see that it's changing the foreground. So I'm lifting it up. You can also come in here and change your clarity, your dehaze values, and if you need to get extra contrast, you can lift your highlights up and whites, and then bring your shadows down. And we can also take a look at our histogram if we wish so. These are the masking tool options, so we click on the tick here and we go back in and we want to show our histogram. So we have an idea of that. The image is probably a bit too dark at the moment because we don't have anything going on really in the highlights. So what we could do is we could do an overall exposure adjustment. So come in here. So sorry, that's the masking options. We don't want those. We want to come down to our little sun here. So these are the adjustments for the overall image. So you can do a curve adjustment if you want, or I can just do a straightforward adjustment here. So I can see my exposure value as I'm adjusting it. So it's 0.23, so about a quarter of a stop. And I don't want to get it too bright. I don't want to lose any of those details in the sky. So you can bring your highlights down. This will bring it down in the overall image if you want. But just be aware that on the screen, what you might see may be different from when you upload it online. So your histogram will always tell you the definitive exposure values. Okay, so we can also check the detail. So one thing that I was quite amazed was by the actual level of detail that the DNG files recorded from my mobile phone camera, because I have been quite disappointed with using the standard phone app and also some other apps that I've tried out with for the cameras. I've never managed to get the amount of detail that I felt was that this camera could capture, or the camera on this smartphone could capture. But with the DNG files, I feel the detail it captures is quite nice, even though at low ISOs it still remains a little bit grainy, but it does capture, especially in the center, quite a nice bit of detail. Okay, so I hope you found this video useful, where we looked at using the masking tools in Adobe Lightroom for your landscape photography. Thank you for watching.